Earlier today, Everton sacked manager Frank Lampard after Saturday's 2-0 defeat to West Ham left the Merseysiders languishing in 19th place in the English Premier League. Lampard assumed the reins at Goodison Park in January 2022, guiding the club to a 16th place finish last season. But this season has been another campaign of struggle with the club, managing only 3 wins this season against 11 losses. This is a look at some key statistics where Everton are concerned. So they played 20, won 3, lost 11, drawn 6, scored 16 goals, let in 28. They let in 1.4 goals per game, and they've only kept 4 clean sheets. Joining us via Zoom is a man who covered the English Premier League for a heck of a long time. Simon Evans is now mastering gridiron in the United States. Simon, it's very, very bitter for the Toffees right now, and they've made Frankie Lampard the fall guy.
Yeah, they have really. I mean, it's one of those decisions where I think, I was talking to an Everton fan today and they were like, probably he had to go, but there was no great, campaign to get him out because the fans feel that and understand that the problems at Everton go way deeper than the man on the bench.
I find it funny. Everton have been, I don't want to say lucky because they've authored their own luck, but in previous seasons, they've had a goal machine, Romelu Lukaku, who scored the bulk of his Premier League goals for them. And we make fun of Lukaku and his touch and everything else, but when you look at his numbers, especially his English Premier League numbers, you realize how successful he is in arguably the toughest league in the world. It's not arguable anymore. It is the toughest league in the world. Then they had Richarlison, who was devilish up front for them, creating goals and scoring goals. There was a period when they had Calvert-Lewin fit and he was banging in the goals. But in real terms, who does Lampard have to score the goals for them at Everton, and what have the board done to give him that player to score the goals to keep Everton in the top flight?
Yeah, I mean, the only player they brought in when it was clear that Calvert-Lewin's injury problems were going to continue this season was Neil Maupay, who they brought in from Brighton, yeah, who is not a player who's going to be able to fill that gap. I mean, really, they got caught out by the injury to Calvert-Lewin. They thought they could get away with that this season. And they obviously can't, and they have that problem up front. But they have problems at the other end of the field as well, despite the fact that Jordan Pickford has had an excellent season and has kept them in so many games where they've ended up losing anyway. So problems all over the field, really, for Everton. But you've highlighted the number one, really, which is the lack of goals because there's no striker.
Yeah, and you speak about problems, and I can only think about some more problems because there are some massive fixtures coming up, Simon. They have to play Arsenal, they have to play Liverpool. Who comes into this setup now at such short time and creates a turnaround for Everton to ensure that they aren't relegated?
It's a really difficult job and a really difficult task because the board and the chairman there at Everton are being criticised all the time for short-term thinking and not having a vision and a plan and so on. But then you do have to think in the short term if you want to stay in the Premier League this year. Do you appoint somebody for a 3 or 4 year project when you're risking going out of the league this season? So it's very, very difficult. I mean, the 2 names that seem to be at the top of the bookmakers' odds list at the moment are former Leeds United manager and many much experience elsewhere than Leeds United, Marcelo Bielsa, the Argentinian, and Sean Dyche, the former Burnley manager as well. The fact that those 2 names come up tells you everything because they're 2 completely different managers with completely different backgrounds. We don't know what Everton's vision is, what their plan is, whether they're looking short term or not. But they need to be very careful because they're building a new stadium there and investing a lot of money, and they don't want a brand new 60,000 stadium in the Championship.
Right, and that just brings it back to the point that sacking Frank Lampard isn't really the end of their problems. It isn't even the start of solving their problems because bringing in a new manager with the same set of players doesn't fix anything. There was once upon a time they had Carlo Ancelotti, and of course Carlo Ancelotti has created a name, a reputation for himself, and he couldn't fix this Everton team. He couldn't help them. So bringing in these names that we think are supposed to come in, is that a quick fix? Does that help the problem?
it probably doesn't. You're right. There are so many different problems, but also you could look at it and say that with Lampard, they were probably going to go down. And you look at the players that they have. Are they really a relegation team? They're not a good team. They're not going to be anywhere near the top half, really. But they should be better positioned than they are, even with the problems, even with the limitations. They're losing games that they shouldn't be losing. So. Yes, a new manager could fix that and could keep them up in the way that Sam Allardyce did there previously and in the way that, in the end, Lampard did last season.
Yeah, managing hasn't worked out for Lampard. You see him doing something else?
He had a spell of doing television punditry in between the Chelsea and the Everton job, but, he seemed very, very determined to keep on in management. I do wonder if he didn't rush things a little bit. He was doing very well at Derby County in the Championship and seemed to be progressing that club and that team. And then he jumped at the chance to go to Chelsea, and who can blame him as a former Chelsea player? But I wonder if sometimes, and Wayne Rooney's name is being mentioned now as a possible for the Everton job. I wonder if sometimes the Gerrards and Lampards, these kind of people, and Rooney, they don't need a bit more time. Give themselves 4 or 5 years learning the ropes before they take on these big high-pressure jobs.
Yeah, well, Simon, you stay with us. We're going to take a quick break and come back to pick up the discussion.